Between racism, the blacklist, the casting couch, and the closet, survival in the 1950s film industry studio system required more than just thick skin and determination. While Billy Wilder was writing the screenplay for Sunset Boulevard, he feared censorship and studio interference so much that he told the studio he was adapting a short story that didn't exist and only submitted a few pages at a time. When they began filming, the script wasn't finished, so no one knew how it ended. The working title was A Can of Beans in an effort to hide the anti-Hollywood nature of the project from the studio brass. Wilder came to America to escape the Nazis, having lost family at Auschwitz. He knew all too well about oppression and censorship and saw something to be afraid of in the enforced morality of the Hays Code.
But we do know that it's literally true that a man had to keep his feet on the floor while making love to a woman on a divan or a lounge chair.
The production code was a set of guidelines that decreed which topics were off-limits and which were to be handled with care. Its influence was felt in Hollywood from 1930 until 1968, when the Motion Picture Association adopted the rating system that is still in use with a few minor changes today. Movie stars were expected to maintain a certain image, both physically and socially, and the studios were ruthless in enforcing it. Homosexuality was taboo, so much so that Rock Hudson, who had been romantically linked to several male stars, was forced into a marriage in 1950. Shortly before his 30th birthday, Hudson married his agent's secretary, Phyllis Gates. They divorced 3 years later. In 1985, Hudson would publicly reveal his AIDS diagnosis and turn the conversation about AIDS and HIV into a national one.
Mr. Rock Hudson has acquired immune deficiency syndrome.
Persistent rumors of homosexuality or bisexuality attached themselves to several other notable stars of the period. Tallulah Bankhead, Marlene Dietrich, and Greta Garbo were frequently mentioned in such a context.
I shall die a bachelor.
But to be labeled gay or bi would have been career death if confirmed. So while stars did as they wished behind closed doors, no hint of homosexuality was allowed to creep into the public eye. In 1950, the achievements of the civil rights movement were years away. America was still very much a segregated society, and actors and actresses of color were treated and paid poorly, denied equal rights, and forced into stereotypical roles with stereotypical dialogue.
Who dat?
Who that say who that?
Who dat say who dat? When I say who dat?
Hollywood whitewashed scripts, meaning that non-white roles were often played by white actors. Orson Welles played Othello in blackface in 1955, and in 1950's Winchester 73, Rock Hudson played a Native American. Then there was Marlon Brando in Tea House of the August Moon.
Lovely ladies, kind gentlemen, pleased to introduce myself. Sakini by name, interpreter by profession.
Blackface had been a feature of Hollywood productions for decades prior, going back to Al Jolson in 1927's The Jazz Singer. But increased racial tensions in the 1950s made the whitewashing of roles much more troublesome and contentious. In 1951, Ava Gardner, a white woman, played a mixed-race character passing as white in Showboat. She was cast over Lena Horne, who was actually of mixed descent, because the studio was worried about how audiences would receive her love scenes with a white man. Interracial marriage was still very much taboo and actually illegal in many states, so there was some question of whether they could even show Horne in romantic situations. Black actors had little recourse, leverage, or social agency, so roles that were originally written for characters of color were regularly renamed or recast to feature white actors instead.
Yes, I know. You never expected to see me.
When they were cast, black actors and actresses were often given smaller roles, or demeaning ones, and little recognition. The black vaudeville circuit, where many black performers got their start, was hard work for little pay, largely catering to old minstrel stereotypes and a point of argument within the black community. Hattie McDaniel, who had a career in vaudeville and later worked at Sam Pick's nightclub as a singer before coming to Hollywood, won an Oscar for her role in Gone with the Wind, but didn't get many opportunities to play anything besides a maid or a servant for much of her career. In fact, at the Oscars that evening, McDaniel was seated apart from the rest of the audience. In Jill Watt's biography titled Hattie McDaniel, Black Ambition, White Hollywood, she quotes McDaniel saying, "I can be a maid for $7 a week, or I can play a maid for $700 a week." McDaniel wasn't allowed to attend the premiere of Gone with the Wind in 1939, and by the 1950s, the situation hadn't improved to any noticeable degree. Black actors and actresses were still relegated to largely supporting roles, with a few exceptions. Dorothy Dandridge, for example, was nominated for Best Actress in 1954, but had little success in Hollywood after. When movie star Kim Novak was discovered to be in a relationship with Sammy Davis Jr., studio head Harry Cohn forced Davis into breaking it off. Interracial marriage wasn't legal in the US until 1967, so when the two were romantically linked by a gossip columnist in 1957, it meant big trouble. Davis had been linked romantically to several Hollywood leading ladies, but Cohn, who had taken great pains to develop Novak into a big studio bombshell, saw the actress as his own personal project. He was so infuriated that he suffered a mild heart attack at the news. Since Novak's relationship with Davis would jeopardize her status as a sex symbol and potentially cost the studios a great deal in lost profits, Cohn, already notorious for his temper, called on his shady mob connections, who threatened to end Davis's life. According to Davis's friend Arthur Silber, in an article in Smithsonian Magazine, they said they would break both of his legs, put out his other eye, and bury him in a hole if he didn't marry a black woman right away. Davis and Novak broke it off, and he married somebody else a year later. The classic On the Waterfront had strong parallels to director Elia Kazan's own experience testifying in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee. HUAC was tasked with investigating allegations of communism, and much of the investigation focused on Hollywood. Kazan was brought before the committee in 1952. Unlike most of the people questioned, he named names, a fact Hollywood never forgot and only partially forgave.
A great deal of animosity still lingered between those who had given up names to HUAC and those who had suffered under the blacklist, or who had friends who had suffered.
Interviewed by NPR in 1988, Kazan said of his testimony, "I thought very hard about it, and I did. I made a difficult choice. Both sides, both ways would have been difficult for me." Kazan downplayed the impact his testimony might have had, but the complicated Kazan was quoted in slightly different context in a French interview in 1962, saying,
"You don't want to have dinner with a monster, but in art, it's necessary to be a monster in part, to have very strong feelings and to have them on the outside so that we can use them."
While the script for On the Waterfront deals with longshoremen in Hoboken, it also deals with mob interference and political betrayal. So it's not much of a stretch to conclude that the betrayals in the film had a more personal resonance for Kazan, given his testimony. During the 1950s, hundreds of filmmakers and other industry professionals found themselves on a blacklist compiled by the studios in order to avoid backlash from employing talent with alleged communist ties. The film High Noon was written in response to the HUAC by Jewish screenwriter Carl Foreman, who was blacklisted by Hollywood after pleading the fifth in front of the committee. The following day, Columbia Pictures began the process of firing him and taking away his producer credit on High Noon, which meant that, according to Glenn Frankel, author of High Noon, The Hollywood Blacklist and the Making of an American Classic, he really lost his control over the film, and for all intents and purposes, that was the end of his Hollywood career. Foreman left America for England, where the professional and emotional impact of being blacklisted lingered for the rest of his working life. Women were expected to maintain a studio-approved persona in both their public and private lives, a standard men were not held to as closely. Ingrid Bergman became interested in Italian director Roberto Rossellini after seeing two of his films, Open City and Kaizen. She offered to act for him.
Could I also come into that type of picture? Could I become as real as that?
In 1950, she went to Italy to work with him on the film Stromboli. At the time, she was married to Peter Lindstrom, and the two had a daughter, but she fell in love with Rossellini and moved in with him. She was pregnant with his child before her divorce from Lindstrom was finalized, and this scandal prompted outcry and outrage in America. Bergman was ridiculed in the press, and there were calls for a boycott of her work. While she didn't intend to return to Hollywood, the damage to her career was significant. Her daughter, Isabella, said in a Newsweek interview, "Mother spoke 5 languages and had a full career in English, a full career in Swedish, a full career in French and German, which is very unusual. Bergman's career path would probably have been quite different without the moral outrage of America that led her to turn her back on Hollywood. Studios had clauses banning pregnancy written into stars' contracts. After all, according to the wisdom of the studio heads, a woman couldn't be a sex symbol and a mother at the same time. As a result, many actresses were forced to choose between having a child or having a career. The fact that abortion was illegal and dangerous was a lesser concern than any potential damage to their looks, reputation, or earning power. Abortions were commonplace even before the 1950s, and stars like Judy Garland, Lana Turner, and Joan Crawford were only a few women said to have had them. Fixers like MGM's Eddie Mannix were reported to have arranged more than a few. Speaking of the Hollywood double standard, women were often involved with men many years their senior.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.
For example, while filming the James Dean classic Rebel Without a Cause, Natalie Wood reportedly had an affair with the director, Nicholas Ray. Natalie Wood was 16 at the time, while Ray was 43. While this would raise eyebrows today, there were no consequences back then, despite the statutory rape laws on the books in California stating that their age difference should have resulted in charges. Wood had a less than perfect home life before being drawn into Hollywood. In her book, Natalie Wood, The Complete Biography, biographer Suzanne Finstad suggests Wood may have been forced into a relationship with Frank Sinatra at 15 and reportedly began a relationship with Ray in order to secure her role in Rebel Without a Cause. The California Penal Code defines a minor as someone under the age of 18 and specifies that sex with a minor 3 or more years younger than the perpetrator may face a misdemeanor or a felony. Clearly, the difference in their ages was significant enough to qualify. The relationship fell apart, and Wood moved on to become involved with Robert Wagner, whom she married in 1958. Despite making money for the studios, actors and actresses made little money themselves, and in a few cases didn't get paid at all. When the 1957 classic film 12 Angry Men was released, star and co-producer Henry Fonda didn't see a paycheck. Produced on a small budget by Hollywood standards of $340,000, 12 Angry Men got good reviews but wasn't immediately profitable.
You couldn't get a cast like that today. These guys were wonderful.
Fonda and writer-producer Reginald Rose had deferred their salaries and ultimately, inexplicably, didn't recoup even half of their expected pay. Fonda remained critical of the role the studios played in the film's disappointing box office. In his autobiography, he blamed United Artists for failing to properly support the film in the marketplace. For example, they didn't re-release the film after it was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, which is the custom in the industry. While 12 Angry Men went on to earn far more money and garner international acclaim over the years. 12 Angry Men is on the American Film Institute's list of 100 Years, 100 Movies, a list of the 100 best American movies of the 20th century.